Got here on Flip That Script. And today, I wanted to talk to you about grief and grieving in the context of this ongoing subject of narcissism, toxic family, and emotional abuse. As you go through your awakening process and come out of denial, as well as in response in your own life, mind and heart, to decisions, some of them tough, that you may end up making in response to the harsh reality that you have family members that are bullies, toxic, abusive. You will experience grief. I would consider the grief, regardless of what route you go, to be kind of a complicated grief, because you will be grieving for people that haven't passed away. You'll be grieving what was and how they've behaved, and the hurt and chaos and drama that you remaining connected to them has brought into your life. The hurt, the sadness, the disappointment, betrayal, and you'll also be grieving what wasn't there, the things that their disorder and their emotional immaturity and unhealthiness involves a lack of ingredients and behaviors and things that it's normal to expect. The emotional invalidation, for instance, as opposed to empathy and understanding. The lack of reciprocity that you're used to in healthy relationships. It's just a very, very sad thing to have to contend with the negative experiences, and like I said, again, the lack of the things that it would be normal to expect, such as empathy, support, encouragement, being proud of you when that's warranted, feeling sad for you when you're going through something difficult, and so forth. I consider the grief to be complicated, as I mentioned, simply also just because you're grieving people that are still living. Should you choose to go completely no contact, that's even a more profound grief. And it'll progress through stages, not in a linear fashion, as much information that you can read about grief in general is that there's the stages as delineated by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, which has come to be broadly known in our culture and our society. And you can make progress through these stages, but it's not a straight line, and you may kind of go back and forth between denial, which can still pop up later, where you might have some self-doubt as to, like, was it really that bad? Has it really been this bad? Am I overreacting? Am I really just being oversensitive, like they say? Am I being unreasonable? While bringing those things up, let's also not forget that in abusive relationships, they kind of try to train you or condition you to have that kind of self-doubt. There's, of course, anger. And sadness. And then, eventually, acceptance. And of course, as I said, you can kind of switch back and forth between these different stages as you go through the process. And it would make sense that you would still grieve, even if you're going to ultimately adopt some strategies and do something short of going no contact. This relates to my previous video of radical acceptance, because, and they kind of go hand in hand, because what you're grieving is the reality of the problem. And it's kind of like, once you see the pattern and can connect all the dots and have an awakening like I did, once you start to learn more about toxic families, emotional abuse, and narcissism, it's kind of like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So once you begin to truly see it and acknowledge the harsh reality, that's kind of when the grieving will begin. Once you start to see and know that they're never going to change. So this kind of process goes hand in hand with the whole process of radical acceptance. And just as in grieving anything profound, such as the loss of a loved one, in this case, you're grieving basically the loss of hope that things will ever be different in terms of the issues that they have that have negatively impacted you. And what I wanted to say in regards to the fact that this is still a grief and can be a profound grief, you need to practice self-care. So the self-care is also part and going through the grieving process is part of you starting to change and eventually, as you come out the other side of it, becoming a stronger and somewhat transformed you. And this can be a long process, like grieving the death of a loved one. So practice self-care just like when you're going through any kind of a grief. Get enough rest. Eat right. Exercise. Spend time doing things you enjoy. And get support from friends as well as any of your support system, even if that includes family members, but only family members that are healthy, that can understand, and that you know are not going to be flying monkeys for the narcissistic and abusive family members. And I'll mention this again in a future video most likely, but I strongly recommend that you get some kind of a counselor or therapist involved once you're to the point that you are very clearly seeing and acknowledging that you have toxic and abusive family members, to help you through the process of grieving and of making whatever changes you might need to make to ease, lessen, or perhaps, if you go as far as no contact, completely eliminate the impact of what you have experienced from your toxic family members. A general recommendation I will make is that even if you don't ultimately go no contact, I recommend that you at least take a break from any contact with your abusive family members to give you a chance to let your head clear and to work on educating yourself more if you need to, and time to reflect, and time to begin to heal. The reason that I'm going to recommend that you do that at the least, as is often said in books and articles and other YouTube channels regarding abuse within a toxic family system, is the practical advice and assertion, which is hard to deny, which is that you cannot heal in the same environment which caused the injuries and the impact from which you need to heal. So you cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick.